roll with the flow, adapt to the issues that are there. I think the one thing is, at least, is always staying true to what your vision for the program is.
Welcome back to First Down presented by CoachTools. I'm your host, Justin Tichinell. Episode 125 featured Brent Barnes, the head football coach at Grinnell College. Coach Barnes has been the head football coach at Grinnell since December of 2019, which was right before the start of COVID. Today we spoke about the importance of adaptability, the need to be able to recruit and connect with young people, and also the value of staying true to the initial vision of your program. So let's dive right into the content, and I hope you enjoy.
My background is kind of like the rest of my life. My father was in the Navy, so I went to 8 schools first 8 years of my life, and I've made a lot of stops in my college coaching career. Got involved in this in a little bit different way than most people. Didn't play in college for what it's worth, and just kind of got back involved in my late 20s, back in the late 90s, and went to graduate school. Got on as a graduate assistant at Montclair State in New Jersey. And the original plan, honestly, was to coach high school and teach. That was my original plan. But I kept getting more responsibilities in the college coaching world, kind of bounced around the first couple years. I was at Redlands, Utica for a year as a graduate assistant as well. Got on at the University of Chicago, and then finally got a full-time job at Middlebury in the late 2000s, so about 15 years ago, I guess. And at that point, once you get into that position, it's a lot easier to find jobs that are full paying and that you can support yourself a little bit better. So bounced around a little bit, went to Simon Fraser, a program that recently shut down up in Canada, but that was an offensive coordinator position. Rhodes College in Memphis, Alfred up in upstate New York. So it's been a lot of different journeys. The last job prior to being here as the head coach at Grinnell, I was the defensive coordinator at Alfred State, again up in Western New York. Certainly a different school than ours, but similar situation, trying to completely rebuild a program that had fallen on hard times.
Yeah, and off camera for the audience watching, we were just talking about our similarities because I played at Gettysburg College and we're in a similar situation just in the state of the program. And Coach Barnes and I were talking about how there's certain things that just take time. And going back to your early days, coach, talking about how you bounced around from school to school because your father was in the I believe you said the Navy.
Yes.
Can you talk about how that experience of bouncing around as a young person when you're in school has served you and helped you maybe have like a short-term memory or just adapt better to new roles when you are in your professional career?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, a lot of times, and I'll relate it to coaching. A lot of times when you're looking at a coach, you want to get guys from successful programs who've had that experience. But what happens is you go from a successful program and then you're going into a new program. And I can tell you there are roughly 750 to 800 college football programs in this country. And while they certainly have similarities, none of them are exactly the same. The culture of the institution is different. How the athletic department run can be different. The resources you have are different. You cannot simply take the blueprint you used at school X, implant it on school Y, and expect the same results. You're going to have to make modifications. And I've seen that over my time in the coaching world of how that operates. That, I'll be honest with you, the plan I had when I first got the job here in January of 2020 is a lot different, especially in terms of recruiting and resources that we have, than it is today in January of 2024. So, and that's just getting knowledge of the program and making adjustments. So I do think having that broad experience in a bunch of different places has served me pretty well here in terms of being able to adjust on the fly, um, to keep the program moving in the right direction.
And that was a pretty tumultuous time back then, January of 2020. So what was that like taking over as a head coach right in the beginning of COVID?
Yeah, we didn't know COVID was happening in 2020, or at least in January, right there.
Yeah.
And certainly with, you're trying to rebuild a program, et cetera. Our school was one of the first to cancel the 2020 season. We did that, I think, in July. of 2020. And at the time I was concerned. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know the rest of Division III would cancel. About 10 days after that, I think the Ivies canceled. The Ivy schools canceled their season. We're an elite academic school like the Ivy League. When that happened, that was immensely good to hear because we knew, hey, if that's going to happen, some of the other elite schools at Division III are probably going to cancel their seasons as well. That started to come piecemeal over the course of the next couple of weeks. And once everyone's on that same ground, you feel like, hey, we can still recruit. Everyone's doing the same thing this year. Kids were going to understand. And again, my biggest concern was not playing the season for the kids at the school was an issue, but my biggest concern was recruiting. That hey, you guys aren't going to play. You're going to play in 21. Again, it's hindsight's 2020, but as you said, a lot of things were going on in the summer of 2020. That you didn't know. You weren't sure. Hey, are we even going to play in 21? If you're recruiting a young man who's 17, 18, they want to go to a place where they're going to play, where they know the program's going to be around. Getting everybody on the same ground there was immensely helpful to us. We ended up having a pretty good recruiting class. Those guys will be seniors in our program next year.
And that fall of 2020, that was actually my senior year at Gettysburg. So we didn't even, like you guys, didn't have a season. So what are some of the lessons that you learned over that time period that have maybe helped you as you're getting back into the normal time around now?
Well, that's a good question. I think roll with the flow, adapt to the issues that are there. I think the one thing is at least is always staying true to what your vision for the program is. In other words, hey, obviously that was a massive bump in the road for everybody. All right. And I think there's probably a tendency to go, hey, how do we solve this problem? How do we solve that problem? What are we doing with our kids who aren't on campus? Or at least our guys weren't on campus that first fall semester of 2020. How are we keeping them engaged and whatnot? And all of that was important to adjust to on the fly. But I think keeping true to your initial vision for the program, your initial blueprint for how you're going to turn this around is vital as well, that you can't lose sight of the bigger picture with that. And for us, it was getting more players in the program. Recruiting was of the utmost importance. And we spent a lot of time focused on that. Again, not saying we blew off the kids in the program at the time. We didn't. But our focus was a lot more on recruiting, getting more kids into the program so that we could come back in 2021 and begin this turnaround project.
And I think that's a lesson that I also learned over that time is that you just have to go with the flow because really there was a global pandemic. There's nothing you can do about that personally. So for me, I was blessed enough to be blessed enough to be on campus for that semester and had the opportunity to not obviously I wasn't playing, but had the opportunity to be in an entrepreneurial course, which is what actually helped me get started with my company, CoachTools, which is what I sponsor the podcast with. So that's just like you were saying. I think for any student athletes that are out there watching, I think it's vital to if you end up getting thrown adversity, if something happens in the world and you can't control it, there's nothing you can do about it. Just roll with the flow and understand that adversity is going to happen, and you need to be strong enough to adapt and know that just continue with what you know is true and have that focus to go towards your bigger goals down the road.
Absolutely.
So, any last words that you would want to share with the audience today, Coach?
Oh, I don't know. For student athletes, as if you're a junior, now's the time you probably need to start looking a little bit more seriously at recruiting with regards to that. I know not every school is going to reach out to you. There's at our level, Division III, there are a ton of different types of institutions out there. It is there's a more variety of schools than there is to say Division I. Those frankly are mostly state schools or larger private schools. At this level, a lot of differences between institutions, both in terms of their academics, in terms of their programs, et cetera. It's, the one piece of advice I always have is do your research. I don't know what your goal is, but find out what you're looking for in a college football program. All right. There are rosters out there with 180 kids. All right. There are rosters out there with 50 to 60. Whichever you want to play at is fine, but you want to know that going into it, as opposed to just, hey, I went to visit campus and coach said it was going to be awesome, so I went. You need to do a little more research than that. All right.
Yeah.
That would probably be my biggest piece of advice for the student athletes out there.
And go to focus on Grinnell. What are some things that maybe you guys use when you're talking to recruits that are some benefits of going to Grinnell?
Yeah, we are. Again, we're in Central Iowa, and again, I'm not an Iowan, so I don't say this derisively, but I will say that when you think of elite academics, the state of Iowa doesn't really come to mind, and that's okay. But if you do research on our institution, we're probably academically one of the top 5 to 7 schools out there. We have very different difficult requirements in order to get accepted to our institution. And because of that, we're looking to recruit elite students, not just elite athletes with regards to that. But it also is an opportunity. We are one of those smaller roster teams out there. We're going to have a roster of about 60 to 65 this year. Again, my hope's to grow it into the 70s, but that's going to be our roster. So an opportunity to come immediately and compete for playing time, that's what we're looking for. All right. If you're a really smart young man and you really want to see the field as a first-year player, this is a school you need to seriously take a look at, because we're going to give you that opportunity, not just in the classroom, which if you're really bright, that's probably pretty important to you, but also on the field right away. This is not a pay your dues program. All right. We don't have a JV program. We expect our first years to compete immediately for playing time. And if you don't have that competitive fire, this probably isn't the place for it.
Yeah. And you're really not lying. I just looked it up. So you guys have an 11% acceptance rate. So
We do.
your
Yes.
academics seem to be right up there with like the Ivies, which is very impressive.
It is, yes, and I think a lot of people don't realize that until they start getting into their research. But once you do that, you see, hey, this is a pretty unique school and a pretty unique opportunity. And as I say to the guys, don't let the fact we're in Central Iowa deter you from taking a look at us. Our campus is absolutely beautiful. The guys that visit, even that don't choose us, walk away saying that they had a remarkable time on their visit. So it is a unique opportunity that I encourage you to take a strong look at.
Yeah. And I can't recommend small liberal arts college education more. So definitely appreciate you
Absolutely.
sharing all that information, coach.
Yes, thank you, Justin. Appreciate being on the podcast today.